Let's talk about variable types in Stata. There are two main variable types in Stata, string variables and numeric variables. Let's start talking about string variables. String variables store text where they can contain anything from letters, numbers, and special characters. The storage type in Stata string variables when you use the describe command is str. Now here keep in mind that string variables can be used to store numbers, but you cannot do any numerical analysis on those numbers. Stata is going to treat them as text. For you to be able to perform any numerical analysis on a variable, it has to be stored in Stata as a numeric variable. So now let's talk about numeric variable. Now numeric variables, they store numbers. Now we can further classify numeric variables into two types. We can have a continuous numeric variable and a categorical or discrete numeric variable. A continuous numeric variable would be one that can take on any value in some reasonable range like income or height. And a categorical numeric variable would be one that takes on a set number of values and each value represents something. For example, we can consider gender to be a categorical numeric variable which takes two values 0 and 1. And now each of these values would represent something, where 0 could represent male and 1 could represent female. Now, Stata has a proper color-coded system where the default data colors that you see when you open the browser window are given to us as for living. Now, any variable that shows a red color is a string variable. So in this data set, we can see that make and MPG are both string variables. Now, make to make sense because it has letters and it has special characters like spaces and all. MPG, you can see even though it stores numbers, but because it's in red colors, Stata will treat it as a string variable, which basically means that if you try to do any calculations on it, Stata won't do it because it's appearing in red. So its storage type is str. So for us to do any calculations on it, you'll have to convert it into numeric, more on this data. But given this data set, because make and MPG show red color, we can tell that they are string variables. And even though MPG stores numbers, but because data is storing it as a string variable, you cannot do any calculations on it. Now, black will be those numeric variables which don't have value labels. Now, this brings us to what a value label is. A value label are labels that we assign to the values of categorical variables so that we can easily identify what those values represent. Because like we said, the categorical variable has a set number of values and each value represents something. To understand what those values represent, we attach a label to those values. Now, more on this later as well. But here the thing to keep in mind is that any variable that appears in black is a numeric variable which does not have value labels. So here we can see that all of these are numeric variables without value labels, be it rep 78, headroom, trunk, weight, length, turn, displacement, gear ratio, and new model. We can see that all of these from rep 78 to gear ratio are continuous variables, but new model is actually a categorical variable because it only takes two values, 0 and 1. But because it does not have value labels attached to it, so it's coming in black. So any numeric variables that don't have value labels, which will include all your continuous variables and categorical variables without value labels, are going to appear in black. Now the variables that appear in red are those numeric variables with value labels. And since value labels are assigned to categorical variables, it's always going to be a categorical variable with a value label. Now, what does this mean? It has a value label attached. What that means is if I look at this, right, so here it says domestic, right? But when I click on it, you can see over here it shows 0. Now let's compare this to the string variable. If I compare this to the string variable, so we can see over here when I click on this, it shows the same thing because it is storing the text. So this means that this is not actually storing the value domestic, it's actually storing the value 0. Domestic is just the label I've attached to the value 0 to identify what this value means. Similarly, if I go down, it's not storing the value foreign, it's actually storing the value 1. Foreign is the label attached to it. So here foreign and new model are both categorical variables. The difference being that this has labels attached to 0 and 1 to represent what 0 and 1 mean. But we can see what Stata is coding is that what is stored inside Stata is actually 0 and 1. This domestic and foreign are just labels to help us identify. Because see over here, noble new model, it still has value 0 and 1 like foreign, but it's coming in black because it doesn't have value labels which tell me what 0 and 1 represent.